What would it look like if you no longer judged or shamed or bullied that part of you that you feel like is messy and unlovable? My name is Allison Tibbs, and I'm so glad that you're here for this season, especially because over the next 8 episodes, we are going to be looking at different parts of ourselves that are ready to be reclaimed. And each episode, I will share a little bit of my own journey and my experience as I'm still figuring it out, while also giving you some tools and strategies and just different ways to think about how to navigate your own reclamation season. And I wanted to start with this topic around that messy, unlovable part of ourselves, because that's the one that really shifted the entire thought process of this podcast. When I first started I Buy Myself Flowers, it was this concept of self-care as being this thing that really tends to your needs in a deeper way. It wasn't just about bubble baths or spa days. It was more about doing something for yourself, taking care of yourself in a way that actually allows you to be the best version of yourself. And the ritual of buying myself flowers every single Sunday was this declaration around, I don't need anyone's permission to celebrate myself, to do something nice for myself, to be kind and sweet to myself, and to give myself a little bit of beauty and recognition for just being me. It didn't matter if I was in a relationship or not. I would always buy myself flowers every single Sunday. And I did this for years. I still do it to this day. But the ritual of buying myself flowers shifted a couple of years ago after a huge argument that I had. And it was probably the worst argument. You know, especially in relationships, you have that one argument and you're like, that's it. That's the one. That's the one that you can't really come back from it. And it was in that argument that I rethought everything about like buying myself flowers and supporting myself. And I'll share with you why. It was because in that moment, after that argument, I got in the car and I sat in my seat of my car and I just started sobbing. And I wasn't sobbing because I was upset about the argument itself. I was sobbing because I was so embarrassed and disgusted and frustrated with how I showed up. I was so angry at myself for allowing that part of me that a lot of people don't see. But there's a part of me that can access the full expression of her anger. I'm a hothead. I have a temper on me. I don't typically let it out. Like I typically have the tools. I know how to regulate myself. I know how to alchemize anger, and I'm not afraid of my anger. But in that moment, I just lost it. And I just remember sitting in the car and I started to bully that part of me. It's like I remember saying some of the most awful things to that part of myself because I was so frustrated that I'd gotten to that point. And I just decided to go drive and just clear my head and to calm down. And I ended up in a Trader Joe's parking lot, which this is not the first time I've ended up in a Trader Joe's parking lot crying, but that's a different time and a different story. But I just ended up in the parking lot and I was just crying because I was so angry. And what happened is, I think in that moment of me just bullying that part of me, I convinced myself that that part of me was unlovable. And I just sat in the parking lot for a little bit longer. And then literally it was like something just clicked for me and it said, go inside and buy that part of you flowers. Because I had been bullying that part for so long that that part was like battered and bruised. And I wiped my face. I looked horrible. But I went into Trader Joe's and I bought myself about $60 worth of flowers. And I did it because I wanted to prove to that part of myself that it was lovable still. Even in the messy moments, it was still a part of me and I still loved it. Even if I didn't agree with how that part showed up, if I didn't agree with the methods or the word choice or any of that, it was still a part of me and I still loved it. And that's what changed everything about the ritual of buying myself flowers. Because now every time I go into Trader Joe's or wherever I go to buy flowers, I don't just think about buying Allison as a whole flowers. I literally think about which part of me today needs flowers the most. Because in that moment, the part of me that needed the flowers the most was the part of me that I deemed to be unlovable. And self-care is not just about doing something nice for yourself. It's about learning how to stay in relationship with yourself, even when the parts of you are messy or feel unlovable or feel difficult to love in that moment. Because that part of you still has needs. That part of you still wants to be heard and seen and acknowledged. And me buying that part of myself flowers was like reclaiming that part of me. And the beautiful thing about that moment is when I bought myself flowers and I showed myself that unconditional love, it allowed me to show the person I was in the argument with the same type of love. I was able to apologize from a place of true humility and true remorse and with more clarity and empathy. And there was repair that happened. The relationship didn't survive, but repair did happen from that. And that's what I want you to think about for yourself. What would it look like for you to love the parts of you that you have convinced yourself are unlovable or hard to love? I think it first starts with there's a belief that you're holding on to that makes you believe that that part is unlovable. And it can come from so many different places. And usually those types of beliefs that we hold, they don't come from us, right? If we think about ourselves as children, like I have this memory of myself as a child. I think I was probably like 6. And the level of confidence that I had at 6 years old, I wish I could have bottled it up and saved it for me in my 40s now. Actually, more so in my 30s. Because at 6 years old, I remember a moment in my life where I loved every single part of me. Every single part had access, every single part had space to be. And I think over time and throughout life, whether it's through our parents, through our teachers, through our friends, through society, through social media, through the expectations that we put on ourselves, that over time, we start to figure out what parts of ourselves we can let out and be seen and praised and loved, and we know which parts that we should hide. Because we tell ourselves that they're hard to love. They make us hard to love. If someone really saw that part of me, they wouldn't love me. And so we do everything in our power to keep that part of ourselves locked away. And I did that. Especially the angry part of me. I think because when most people see me, they think that I'm this cool, calm, collected, even-keeled person. And like I said, I am, but I'm also an Aries rising. I'm also an eldest daughter. Like, she's got some heat to her. She's a bit of a spicy meatball. And the reality is, I actually love that part of me. But because it felt so undesirable for other people, I just convinced myself that that part of me was bad and wrong. Now, I want to be clear because my unlovable, messy part really is that version of me that can access my full anger. Like, should this part of me always come out? No. Are there ways to manage anger? Yes. Is it helpful in most situations? No. Right? So what I'm not saying is I'm just going to let that part of me out all the time. But there is another part of me that's really impressed by my ability to go into that emotion that so many people are afraid of. And my therapist and I had that conversation where she said, Allison, so many people struggle with accessing anger or rage or grief because they don't have the control, they don't have the ability to kind of navigate it and process it the way that you do. Because the feedback she was giving me is that most of the times when that part of me bubbles up, I actually know how to work with it. But every now and then something happens and I don't have the tools, and that part takes the driver's seat, and it leaves me feeling completely ashamed and embarrassed. And when I told my therapist about me going to buy that part of me flowers, you could see that she was like, you get it. You get it. Because if you keep bullying and beating up on that part of you that you feel is unlovable, all you're doing is reinforcing that belief. And for me, that belief came from the fact that there were moments where I did let my anger out, and it scared someone, right? And it made them feel like, whoa, what's going on? And I think I took that data and I took that information and I took it as, that's bad. But I'm learning, and what I've learned from that experience is that it's just a matter of, instead of beating that part of yourself up, it's thinking about, what does that part need? When I talk about the definition of self-care, I say it's the intentional practice of tending to your needs. So if we look at it through the lens in season 2 of like the reclamation season, where we're reclaiming the parts of ourselves, I had to start asking myself, what does that part of me need? And when I tell you that it probably took me about 3 weeks of me journaling and sitting with that part to understand what that part of me needed. It was such a beautiful experience. It was painful because underneath anger, a lot of times, is either grief or fear. And I didn't realize how much grief and fear I was holding on to. And I coupled that with the beliefs around that part of me being unlovable, and how it then cascaded into me feeling like I was unlovable. Because that's the danger that we lean into when we start to continue to reinforce the belief that that part is unlovable. It cascades out, and then we could start to believe that we as a person are unlovable. And that's really hard to kind of flip that switch. But I think if we realize how powerful it can be to sit with that part and understand that part, everything can change. Everything can literally change. And I want to give you a activity, if you will, something to think about. And I would encourage you to grab a pen and paper, get your journal out, and go and sit somewhere for 30 minutes, uninterrupted, undisturbed, phone on do not disturb, and be with that part and write a letter to that part. Because what I realized and what I learned through that process, that 3-week process, is that that part of me was so afraid of me that I couldn't go deeper until that part knew that I loved it, if that makes sense, right? It's like if you've ever adopted a puppy from an animal shelter that's had a rough life, and you bring this puppy home and you're so excited, you want to give it all this love and attention and care, but all the puppy knows is abuse. All the puppy knows is, being hit and being yelled at. And you go in to try to pet the puppy and the puppy like bites you or growls at you. It's just a reaction. It's a behavior that's been built over the belief that humans are evil or bad, or that you're in danger. And so it takes time, and you have to continue to tell the puppy that you love it and show the puppy that you love it and give it its space. And slowly but surely it starts to come out, and it starts to, you know, maybe just sit by you for a little bit and then allow you to pet it. And then, it forms into this beautiful relationship. It's the same thing. It's the same thing with that part of you. And so you write a letter to that part and just let it know how loved it is. And one thing that I've had to learn, not just even with that, exercise, but also with other people in my life, is that you can love someone and not maybe agree with how they handle situations. You can love someone and not agree with how they live their life. You can love someone and not agree with, who they choose to be in a relationship with, or how they choose to spend their money or raise their kids, or whatever it is. Loving someone doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything. But what is most important is that they understand that the love is there and that they are loved by you. And so it's almost like you're writing this love letter to the most unlovable part of yourself. And I mean, go for it. Be specific, be honest, be real, be truthful, be completely vulnerable to that part of you. Because only then do you have that opportunity to start to understand what that part really needs. And I promise you, doing that experiment, or that 3-week kind of session with that part of myself, I tell you, I feel like a light switch turned on inside of me, because I also understood so much more about who I was. And I also started to understand and get more feedback and know when that part of me needed to be expressed. I actually now had ways to kind of mitigate that. And I did work with my therapist through some of those, but now I notice when that part gets activated, I notice it in a couple of places. One, I notice that unlovable part, I start to feel like, and like right underneath my rib cage, some call it the solar plexus area. I feel that part start to like almost pulsate a little bit. And typically when I feel that, it's like a check engine light for me just to stop and check in. What's happening right now? Why am I being activated? Why is that part being activated? And I can tell you that I have been able to really prevent some big blowouts from happening simply because I was able to connect with that part of me, because that part gives me a signal now. It gives me a literal signal. And if I ignore that signal, I start to literally feel my heart beating in my body. It gets a little bit louder. So here it's a bit more subtle. Then I start to feel my heart beat kind of pulsating through my body. That's like that, that next level. And if I'm still not ready to take the signal, then my body just gets hot. Like my temperature of my body gets hot, but I don't sweat. It's just like my skin becomes like scorching hot. And usually that's when I catch it. And during that process, as that part of me is giving me little signals and saying like, hey, 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 I check in with myself and I check in with that part. Because I know underneath anger is fear or grief or hurt. And I can say, what's making you sad right now? What's making you frustrated right now? Is there any grief tied to this? And I promise you, as weird as it sounds, just having a moment with that part of me that I used to treat as so unlovable, instead of like bullying it, now I'm giving it space. And by giving that part of me space means that it doesn't have to get to a point where I'm shouting and yelling. Because what I realize is that when I get to that point, it's simply that part of me that is just shouting and yelling, because I am trying to push it back and push it away and make it seem like it's bad. And then it does the thing that it just truly wants to do to simply be expressed. And then I make it feel bad. And I create this horrible cycle. So why did it feel so good to even share that? It does. It feels really good to share that. And my hope is that it's helpful for you as you think about your part. And maybe you have multiple parts that feel unlovable. But take some time and really think about the one right now that's maybe top of mind. And I want you to think about, where did the belief come from that told you that part was unlovable? Because our beliefs are so powerful. And I'm going to talk about beliefs a lot this season because a lot of our beliefs dictate a lot of our behaviors that prevent those parts of us from being reclaimed. So, number one, where did the belief come from? Get some clarity on that. And then once you understand where the belief came from, write the letter and talk about those beliefs, talk about those moments, because beliefs are built over time. You don't just have one moment in life that truly builds a belief that's like solid in your life. Usually it's multiple moments, multiple experiences, multiple exposures that build this belief and make it like a solid belief. And it may be multiple years back. It could be multiple different people, multiple different areas, but usually it's built over time. And once you get clear on what those kind of data points were to build that belief, you can start to break them all apart. And something that I always do when I'm working on my beliefs and changing my beliefs and shifting my beliefs or flipping my beliefs, is the most important question that you have to ask yourself is it 100% true? And never has the answer been yes when I've asked myself that question. It could be 99% true, but it's never been 100% true. And so, with your logical kind of full self going through that experience of your beliefs and knowing that it's not true, you now know that that part of you is not unlovable. And now you have to do the work to repair that relationship with that part. And that's where that letter comes in. Writing that letter to that part of you that you deemed unlovable and letting it know how lovable it is. And then the next time you're at a store, go out and buy that part of you flowers. Because that part deserves your love, your care, your attention just as much as every other part of you does. Just as much as the parts of you where you're so proud of and the parts of you that you allow the world to see, the parts of you that you get praised for, that unlovable part also deserves your love, your care, and attention. And that's what self-care is really all about. It's tending to those parts. So I'm wrapping up this episode, but I do want to leave you with a little parting gift. I have my Nourish Life Coaching Companion deck, and there's always a question that I want to leave you with. So let's see what shows up. And again, this is a deck that I created for myself and then started to use it with my clients in sessions if they needed a little bit of something to focus on or something to ground them with. And the question that we have is, this is really, how do you talk to yourself when you make a mistake? I think that's a pretty fitting question for this episode. And I think that it's a great opportunity for you to maybe think not just how do you talk to yourself, but maybe thinking about how do you talk to that part, right? I mean, this is amazing. I can't make this up. But as I shared with you earlier, when I was listening or remembering how I was talking to that part of myself in the car that led me to Trader Joe's parking lot, it was awful. And I think that self-talk is such a powerful tool, but it can also be a tool that can break you down. And something that I often think about is talking to yourself or talking to the part of yourself like you would talk to your best friend. So think about it. How do you talk to yourself when you make a mistake? And is it loving? Is it kind? Is it supportive? Could it improve? What ways could you improve it? But sit with the idea of self-talk and how that rolls into everything else that we talked about today. And as always, I would love to hear how this episode landed for you. I would love to hear what part of you maybe you thought is unlovable, and maybe hear how the belief work or the letter writing, or even the reflection to this question is helping you to navigate through reclaiming that unlovable part of you. So let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. There will be 7 more episodes coming for this season, and I hope to see you on the next one.